Okay, go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bert Sherman, the Public Utilities Director. As some of you from last year remember the tour that you went on my plants. I shouldn't say the city's plants, but I kind of consider my own. I'm just going to give you an overview of our capital improvement projects that we have doing now and what's coming up in the near future. Current capital improvement projects, as you notice, we've got the wastewater treatment plant, the compost facility, and the water treatment plant. Fiscal year 2022 and 2023, we had 12 capital improvement projects approved, which come up to about $2.8 million. When we first started it out, it was a little bit less than that, but over time, as you all know, prices increased at the time of the actual contracts. These are the current projects that we've got going on right now. We have 3 that's been completed. The clear well number 2 and coating and sealing over at the water plant. Flood barrier footers at the water plant. The bulldozer for the compost. Those are all completed. What we're in progress right now is the basin number 1 aerator. That aerator has been removed and has been replaced. The current aerator that was there is getting sent off for repair, so we have that as a spare later on if we ever need it. So next year we would do aerator number 2. We would put that aerator gear drive in place so we can send off the next one. It's kind of like a PMI type circulation that we do. Currently with contracts, we've got the automatic transfer switch with the water plant, automatic transfer switch with the new River pump station, the new bar screen at New Hope lift station, the bulk storage tank at the WRF, the Westbrook pump station new generator, and the telemetry system upgrade, and the sand filter number 2 rehab. I just want to keep note the new bar screen at the New Hope bar screen, that currently is about 35 years old. It's original equipment. That was one of the reasons why we replaced it. It was number 1 priority on our list for the capital improvement projects. Also, the Westbrook generator, that one was 29 years old, or I'm sorry, 39 years old. And that was a need that we must do too also. We're going to look at the current projects for the WRF. 24 hours, 7 days a week operation. We're constantly going through holidays. We don't stop. Through hurricanes, through flood events, we are operating this facility and the water plant.
Hey, Bert, go back to that slide a second.
Yes.
For the benefit of our military guest here, you can see the end of your runway is right up there about it. Okay, go ahead.
This is the current staff at the water reclamation facility. And why would I put these guys up here for capital improvement projects? I'm going to let you know these are the faces behind the scenes that take care of that equipment that lasts for 35 years. Okay, they're all certified and they're very loyal to what they do. They're one of the things that we promote there at Public Utilities is professionalism, teamwork, and we are very family oriented. Currently with the projects with the WRF is a pecan lift station bar screen. As mentioned in the upgrade with Mount Olive Pickle, Big Cherry lift station is actually going to be decommissioned. That bar screen at Big Cherry lift station is about 5 years old. Instead of taking it and just discarding it, we're going to actually reuse that at Pecan bar screen. And it's in great shape. I've already found out that it will fit into that bar screen at Pecan lift station, so we can reutilize that station and save about $300,000. Repainting the clarifiers, my pictures are going too. We have 4 clarifiers on the WRF, and they are painted at least once every 5 years, and they are done in rotation. The first 2 clarifiers that we ever had was clarifiers 1 and 2. They were built in 1985. Clarifier 3 was in 94, and clarifier number 4 was built in 2000. We have to take that clarifier down because it has mechanical parts and underwater. So every 5 years we have to sandblast them and paint them to make sure that they're operational, so we can get proper settle and treat the wastewater. The UV disinfection, I know you've heard me talk about this before. Currently right now, or last year I put in for the DCIP grant. We just fell under making that. We're going to try it again this year. Currently this is something that's on our radar that we do need to replace. And each year that we hold off on it, it goes up. I think we started out at $800,000. We're now up to $1.8 million to just retrofit that UV system. This is normal maintenance to remove the grit out of Westbrook Pump Station. The Westbrook Pump Station is the main pump station that pumps to the wastewater treatment plant. So anything, if any pumps fail, we're in dire straits of not pumping wastewater to the WRF. Replace the belt filter presses. These presses are 20 years old. They're necessary for us to work with the compost facility. What we do is we do water sludge, and that sludge is actually mixed with the compost, okay? The reason why we do this is, A, we're actually putting back into the city or into the environment versus taking it to the landfill and costing of tipping fees. This is much cheaper than trying to use tipping fees to get rid of our sludge. These presses, like I said, they're working on 22 years old. We're slated for 25, 26 to be replaced, starting at $1.2 million, and respectively for the other one, $1.3 million. Those are current prices as of right now. The headworks at the WRF, this is where the beginning of the process. We have grit removal. Currently, we're maintaining that facility. It's costing us at least $20,000 a year just to suck out that grit that's settled out inside that. We just finished it yesterday for our annual clean out on that. But that structure is starting to get stressed. It's almost 30 years old. Then we have the generators on the plant site. Currently, they're 22 years old. They're slated for 25, 26 budget year. You're looking at $1.5 million as of today to replace this generator. There's 2 of them on site. So the second one will be replaced the following 26, 27 year. And obviously, that would go up respectively. Then we have what we call the basin upgrade. So if we want to expand to accommodate potential more residents and industries in these facilities, we have to expand our waste treatment process. Currently, we're at 14.2 million gallons. This year is a banner year for us. We were way under our capacity this year versus 21. Currently, right now, we could boost it up to 17.7. That would attract more industrial aspects plus more residential aspects to us. That price tag currently, right now, is estimated at $107 million just to do that. Now we're going to talk about the water treatment facility. This is the staff. They take care of this. I got to brag on these folks during that fire that happened a couple weeks ago. I'll tell you some crazy stuff that happened that Friday night. This staff lost communications with their tanks for about an hour. Okay, it was some kind of computer glitch that was going on. Fortunately, the WRF can see the water tanks over there. So while they were working on that aspect around 11 o'clock at night, the WRF could monitor those water tanks so that they could have the information they needed. Soon after that, we got the tanks online. These folks were there to maintain and produce enough water to fight those fires that was happening in Dudley, okay? So these are behind the scene folks that really no one really knows about. During theirs, these are some of the upcoming dredging. Dredging the river is to remove the sand and silt away from the intake structure where they draw the water to treat drinking water. That price to clear out that area went up. It normally costs us about $100,000. This is the new price for it right now. It's $483,000 just to dredge that system. Fortunately about this, annually the staff goes out and dips that river to see if we have to dredge it or not. And they do this around May to make sure. Last year we didn't have to dredge, but we don't know if we have to do it this year. I'm guessing not, because we didn't have any high flows because of hurricanes or any major rain events that would make that river go up. And then we have the structure repairs. If everybody recalls, last year we had Withers come in, Withers Ravenel Engineering Company come in and look at the stress cracks throughout the facility. The facility is 72 years old plus. It has cracks in there in the structure, okay? We were concerned that they had something, we were concerned that it had stress to the structure itself. Do we need to start working on replacing the new water plant? Fortunately, the survey found out that we can repair the structure, and we should be good to go for about 10 years. Then we have our annual elevated tank maintenance. We've got a contract for 10 years, usually, and it costs $300,000. We budget every year for this. This is good until fiscal year 30. Sedimentation reservoir. So we're talking about the intake structure. So the intake structure takes water out of the river and puts it into a reservoir, and then it's pumped to the water treatment plant. That reservoir needs to be dredged every so often for maintenance purposes. That currently right now is budgeted for $75,000. The clear well, we just painted the one on the clear well number 2. This is the clear well number 1. This is the next one on the list. It's a maintenance practice what we do to take care of our structure. And that's estimated at $108,000. As I discussed before, this is a 72-year-old plant. We need to start making planning progress for a new water plant. It's aging itself out. To start that, we're going to need to location. That's going to take about $70,000 just to start. To even build a water plant right now, from design to up build, it's going to take 10 years. Okay. Compost facility. This is the staff over at the compost facility. There's actually 5 slotted slotted employees here. There's 1 vacancy. There's 4 of them currently running that whole facility right now, Monday through Friday. We're struggling with CDLs right now. There is no one really applying for that position. We work with, the waste treatment plant works with Rod and his crew, so if he needs somebody to run a front-end loader or something like that, we can compensate that. But as in getting the CDL, the guy drive the dump truck, they're the only folks in public utilities currently right now with a CDL license. One of the major projects on the compost facility, as you can see, the facility's 20 years old. The building is starting to have wear and tear. We're going to need to get that cleaned up and painted inside and outside. And then in the capital improvement plan, You notice we have a contingency fund of $1.24 million. It's a reserve fund for unforeseen expenses. Currently, and thank God, we have not had to take that money out of there. Capital Reserve Fund, it started out at 1.5 million. We had to take some money out of that to compensate for those bar screens, all those budget items that were under bid. We had to use that money to compensate for those projects. The balance in that reserve fund currently right now is $700,000. We'd like to keep this going, to keep it built. Same with the contingency fund. That contingency fund, let's say something goes wrong with my belt press or something like that. That's not even going to replace that belt press. Okay, so we need to build these funds to make sure that we can take care of any issues on the public utility side. Any questions? Bernadette, they did say to us.
Bert,
Yes.
I want to thank you for this. This is a really good understanding of where you are and what our future requirements are going to be, and there are some things that that because of age and so forth are going to have to be replaced. I mean, it's inevitable that we will have to replace some of these things. So one of the things we haven't done very well here in the city is start reserving for these replacements. And I would highly encourage this council and all future councils to take a look at these major replacement dollars that are going to have to be coming our way. We cannot count on federal funding and grants and so forth.
That's correct, sir. And I do invite council members to come and look at the facilities. I'm going to tell you, I pride myself with the staff that takes care of those facilities. When you go into them, you can tell right away that they do take care of the facilities. But they're aging, and they do need to be replaced. I know it sounds like a lot of money, but over the years, we need to take care of this. Just a little bit, and then I'll leave it at this. We do have a retention aspect issue there also. To run the water plant and the waste treatment plant, you have to have certified operators, okay? Currently, I have 5 staff members at the WRF that are over 5 years, okay? The rest are all new. There's 19 in that department. In the water department, there's 12. There's 5 that are over 5 years. So we're looking at young folks, the young staff that are there. How we retain those guys, how do we keep them there? Just talked about it.
Your utility rates increase should be able to cover these things. We just need to budget accordingly.
Exactly.
And take a look at it in comparison with the HR study, et cetera.
That's correct. But I'm looking at the retainability of the veterans there. If you're over there 5 years, within 3 to 5 years, that someone gets taken away. They go to another city. We train them for another city. So if we have something established to retain the folks that are staying for 5 years, I think that would be a better fix. That's just my thoughts on this. So, any questions?
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so we're up for Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. They requested an opportunity to talk to you all and the public about their housing needs and how we might best support them. Colonel McElhaney.
Good afternoon, everybody. Most of you have met before at other events, but just in case, I'm Colonel Tammy McElhaney. I am the 4th Mission Support Group Commander at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. And on behalf of Colonel Tyrrell, our 4th Fighter Wing Commander, thank you for letting us come here today and address this very important topic. I do have slides. Maybe I need
I think you can push the button there.
Oh,
or
okay. This guy.
maybe the other direction. There we go.
Pushing something, not me. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. So in a second, I will hand this on over to Lieutenant Colonel Hans Winkler. He is the base civil engineer and our 4th Civil Engineering Squadron commander. But first I would like to highlight, for those of you, most of you already know, right? Seymour Johnson Air Force Base is located here in your great city of Goldsboro in the heart of Wayne County. We also, we have the 4 historic F-15 fighter squadrons, 2 operational and 2 training. And our mission is to produce and project combat air power for America. So we also are home to the 916th Air Refueling Wing, which most of you are fully aware. We now have all 12 of the KC-46s. Yes. We also just recently stood back up the 911 Air Refueling Squadron, which is an active associated unit with Air Mobility Command. So that is the recent updates for Seymour Johnson. But what we really want to talk to you today about is some of the wing's priorities, which we are looking. Colonel Teal has said our priority number 1 is improving combat readiness, quickly followed by taking care of our airmen and their families, as well as developing our leaders. Each one of these priorities is critical to each other and locks in. So today what we are going to concentrate is that second priority, airmen and their families. And we're going to talk to you about our demographics on base and our housing needs. And you will see as we go through these demographics, it may be similar to the housing needs you're seeing within your own communities. So at this time, I'm going to turn this on over to Lieutenant Colonel Winkler, and he's going to walk you through our demographics.
Microphone. Sorry, I had to put on the glasses because I feel like 25 years of military service is starting to catch up with me. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Hans Winkler, the commander of the 4th Civil Engineers Squadron. For those of you not familiar with the military, as the base civil engineer, I'm responsible for the sustainment, maintenance, recapitalization of all the base facilities and infrastructure on the installation. I also direct the long-term planning and development and installation and oversee our base housing office, which handles both our unaccompanied and accompanied housing requirements, both on and off installation. I also get to lead some portions of base emergency response services like the fire department, emergency management, and our explosive ordnance disposal teams. As Colonel McElhaney highlighted, the 4th Fighter Wing is focusing on 3 main priorities, and the one that I'll dive deeper into today's briefing is supporting our airmen and families focus areas. First, let me just stress that it's not lost on me that taking care of people within a community encompasses a whole of government approach, regardless if you're living and working on a base or not. The people side of the portfolio often comes with competing internal demands that must be balanced. That must be balanced and optimized within the context of the entire effort. For this specific conversation, I'll be focusing on primarily the housing portion of the internal demands, with a specific desire to educate you on the current operating environment that the men and women are experiencing that are assigned to Seymour Johnson Air Force. That's perfect transition. First, let me just say thank you. Thank you for opening up your community to our airmen and welcoming us into North Carolina. As you may already be aware, the Department of Defense has explicitly stated that the military services rely on the private sector for primary source of housing for accompanied DoD personnel stationed at locations within the continental United States. That means here locally we have roughly 75% of our workforce living in your communities. Recently, housing availability is making it hard for our airmen to find safe and affordable workforce housing that meets their family needs when they arrive to Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. The most recent data shows that across the entire United States, that here at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, we are one of only 2 locations that continues to require an increased temporary lodging expense paid to military members that arrive here due to the housing availability and the time it takes to find an adequate place to live. Getting our military members and their family into suitable homes and integrated into your communities is a readiness issue for the military, and one that we absolutely need your help to address. So to give you some context on what our military workforce looks like that are living within inside of your communities, here's some basic aggregated data. It's important to note that although you can hear the wonderful sounds of our planes flying every day for miles around, that not all of our workforce is air crew or officers. The biggest demand signal arises from our population within inside of our junior enlisted or non-commissioned officer categories. and that's our E1 to E6 personnel that are listed inside the DoD annually published basic table. So they're our workforce, our mechanics, our civil engineers, our firefighters, our security forces personnel. That's the predominant amount of our workforce. The Department of Defense provides military members with a stipend when they are required to live off base, and this stipend is referred to Basic Allowance for Housing, or BH. The total BH a military members receive is based on the rank of the member and whether or not they have dependents. This means that a senior airman married with no kids receives the same amount of BH as a senior airman married with 4 kids. This sometimes is a really tough spot for our more junior individuals as they start looking for housing availability that meets their needs. As we said before, the total military on and off base housing requirements is roughly 4,450 personnel. On base, we can house a maximum of 686 military service members, or roughly 15% of our total requirement within our privatized housing community. We are constrained from building more homes by laws specific to the military privatized housing initiatives. We can also house 592 unaccompanied junior enlisted within our 10-building dorm campus, and we're currently working renovations and repairs to several buildings that are requiring a large chunk of our total capacity of 722 dorm rooms to be out of use for the next 5 years. I do not see a full restoration of that capacity until 2028 at the earliest. We're also a pipeline base here for the Air Force, which means a lot of our new airmen coming here for our first term or first assignment airmen. And to support that population, we continue to advocate through our corporate Air Force processes the need for a new 96-room dormitory to be built. We realistically don't expect that military construction project to be funded until at the earliest the 2030 plus timeframe. Pulling this all together, it means we are fully reliant on the local housing and rental markets off base to provide the homes needed for the remaining 3,000 plus military workforce. And then to provide some context and insight of where our military members are voting with their feet to live when it comes to the current housing markets, this slide breakdown of the various cities and towns you can find our current workforce population housed. The DoD sets up around a base a zone which is known as a military housing area, or a MHA, and uses that defined area to collect data on housing that feeds into the BH determinations for those stationed at the supporting base. For Seymour Johnson, that MHA is indicated by the dash line. Does this thing have a laser pointer? This dash line. And in essence is the location the Air Force wants to be able to house their workforce. The MHA does not limit a military member from living outside of that area, but those deciding to live further out, it will impact commuting cost that they weigh against other factors. The map highlights all locations that have at least double-digit military representation within that community. There are also 91 cities and towns that are sprinkled throughout and not shown on the map that house single-digit military members in their communities. We rely on each town and city to support our workforce demand signal. As you can see, the vast majority of our workforce, roughly 1,400 members, have found homes here in the wonderful city of Goldsboro. And the next 2 largest military communities are in Pikesville and LaGrange. All 3 of these locations are indicated on the map by the black star with the red outline. Military members are looking for housing needs that most closely meet their primary desires. But as with all residents, will sacrifice some desires to meet others. You can see quite a few have sought residence further away from the installation due to a variety of reasons, such as military to military joint spouse, working at other installations, or spouse employment opportunities that are available elsewhere. The military members with families, if the member has the resources, they will commonly sacrifice commute time and affordability to accommodate family needs and desires. Military members are told to bloom where they are planted. So they work hard to find vibrant communities with good soil to temporarily transplant their families and allow them to grow unabated until the next time they're asked to leave again. They search diligently with this goal to not negatively impact family members with the multiple repeated moves that they do in the service that they are giving to keep America strong. As we discuss more on this topic, we often get asked, how can landlords and property owners highlight their quality houses to the military workforce? And I will tell you from personal experience of my 15 moves in the past 25 years that our members will start looking for homes as soon as they are notified of the assignment. Although we use common websites, we also have another tool at our arsenal that enables military members to look at rental properties that have been vetted by a base housing office official to be suitable for their family needs. Those wanting to showcase their properties to the military workforce can utilize the homes.mil website and can advertise their properties free of charge directly to the military clientele. The base housing office will vet the property and make sure it is in good condition and not in a high crime rate area. Once cleared through the vetting process, the property is listed on the website, and military members, once they arrive to the base, are encouraged to go to this site to look for rentals if they are still looking for a place to live. We see this as a win-win for our communities. The local community gets direct access to the military members that are inbound and looking for a place to live, and the Department of Defense has a stable of homes from which to house its workforce and to collect BAH data. As we referenced previously, we understand that it takes a whole of government approach when working through the people side of the portfolio. Many of these programs are overseen within specific or across several various government levels, such as the local, county, city, regional, state, and federal departments. We've already highlighted that military members are making decisions that involve trade space and things like commuting times, affordability, education, safety, and construction quality. This decision space is further compounded by the right type of inventory availability. This slide is a snapshot in time of the available rental properties listed on both the commercial website called Zillow.com and within the DoD database of homes.mil. As you can see, the inventory is hampering our military workforce from finding homes and driving longer periods of time searching upon arrival. In 2 of our 3 largest off-base military communities, there were less than 5 houses available to rent at that time. We need to work together using a whole of government process to shore up the impediments that are preventing the military workforce from finding housing. Our fighter wing commander, Colonel Till, has often said that there's a healthy symbiotic relationship between Seymour Johnson Air Force Base and the surrounding communities. He says what is good for the base is good for the community, and what is good for the community is good for the base. Seymour Johnson Air Force Base sees improvements in workforce housing in the surrounding area as good for both local community and our military workforce. Both working together, we can continue to strengthen the ties that already deeply bind us. Thanks again for your extremely valuable time. I look forward to the continued conversation. For your community development planners that may be in the room, there are reference slides and the 2 backup slides next that they can utilize for some design guidance as they work with developers in the local community. I'm available to discuss any more if there's any questions.
Does anyone have any
What is
questions?
the policy on the E1s or E6s if you have dorm space?
That's a great question. So we do what's called a waterfall process inside of our dorm capacity. So if a young airman E4 below comes in, we have a priority 1 through 4 level. Right now, our current policy is for all senior airmen to live off the installation as we're going through the renovation. So that means I'm only housing E1s, E2s, and E3s. Some of those E3s I'm also asking to move off installation based on their time in service. So our more senior folks are who we're moving off installation.
The junior members then
Yeah,
are on base?
I try to keep as many on base as possible, but like I said, I only have 592 rooms. We've got roughly 200 folks PCSing in this cycle, so there'll be quite a few shifting off base as I move those newer folks in.
Got one other question. What's happening to the old temporary marriage facility that as you go out of the base, it looks like a bomb hit the corner of it?
Great, the old TLF building?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were, as you all are fondly aware of, there's a lot of construction materials that contain asbestos. During the demolition of that building, we found some asbestos material that we had to abate. So we had to do a contract modification. That's the only reason it's still there. Should be gone in about a month, hopefully, fingers crossed. Yeah, I know. I get it all the time from Colonel Till, so.
Colonel, I'm looking at your BH slide here. Especially for the lower enlisted folks, is this in fact what they're getting now? Or, in other words, are they getting any supplement to that because they're being forced to move off base because of lack of housing?
They are not getting supplements, so this is their rate. I will say each one of those categories, so like NCOs is an average dollar amount from our staff sergeants and
Yeah, I
tech sergeants.
understand.
Each E-band actually gets a specific BAH.
Sure. Understand.
So Mayor Ham, I think your question is, if they're moving out of the dorms, and we're making them move out of the dorms and onto the economy, they do get a portion of a dislocation allowance to help them move off base.
That is a one-time payment.
Okay, that's
to
a
them.
moving
Yes.
supplement or
Correct,
Yeah.
yes, and then
Okay.
their BAH will kick in, so it's to help them establish, down payments for utilities, maybe a deposit, things like that.
So I assume that you're getting some feedback on limited available housing for their price range or their BAH. Is that correct?
That is correct. We're getting feedback across our entire military force for the limited availability of housing, and that's why we're the one of two installations in the continental United States that has that extended time period of 60 days versus the standard 14 days to find housing for our folks.
Yeah. I'm sure it's for all grades, but in particularly, you got retired military here, a Marine, retired Marine over here, Army over here. We've all been through that. We understand that the impact is much harder for those lower enlisted folks than it is for the senior and your warrants and your commissioned officers and so forth.
Yeah,
But it applies throughout.
Yeah, I agree completely. First, thank you for your service. I appreciate the time that you gave to our great nation.
And we got a Marine, former Marine here. I want to.
Solid. I noticed how the Army shortchanged the Marine on that one. That was good. But yes, it absolutely impacts our lower enlisted grades heavier. You can see, like I said earlier, if they have the means, they will look to make sure they're meeting their family's requirements. So a lot of our higher ranking individuals with potentially pulling in more BH will have less decision space that they have to meet.
I have a question. And I know there's a correlation between housing and schools. Do you see an issue with, I teach at Goldsboro High School, do you see an issue with the school choice as it relates to?
So yeah, I'll defer. My daughter actually teaches at Eastern Wayne, so
Okay.
I will defer to that one.
So in answer to your question, yes. So obviously our base housing is maxed out at 98%. Our demographics right now for our children is elementary school age and younger. So our
Can you use the mic, Tammy, because people won't be able to hear you offline.
So our children's demographics right now, when we pull them, for a majority of our children do attend school here in Wayne County. But our demographics are mainly elementary school age and younger. We do have, the next portion would be middle school and then high school. That's our children's demographics. Our next two counties out is Johnston and Wake, is where the rest of the military families have resided, mainly due to either housing or equating the housing as well as to education. And I'll be quite honest with you, Johnston and Wake, someone else addressed it, pay in here, so you, it's the same for education. Johnston and Wake County pay far more for education than Wayne County does. And so we are seeing that is affecting the more experienced teachers, as you address experienced workforce, is departing to other counties. You guys will, Wayne County will hire them, train them, and then about 3 years later, they will leave and go to another county. So it does affect that. We have a large private school population for those that can afford it, and I will point at my rank because it's not cheap. And then we have a large homeschool population on our base as well. And a lot of that has to do with the quality of education. I just briefed the North Carolina Commanders Council about that. North Carolina is ranked dead last for investment in education. So we, the North Carolina Commanders Council, will start working with the North Carolina Veterans Affairs as well to come up with some proposals on how to also improve education through the state by perhaps increasing stipends to counties where installations reside to help improve the quality of the education, not just for our children,
Right.
but for the entire
For the
community,
community.
right? Because we are part of your community. So that is our goal, and we are looking for all avenues to do that. We mentioned DSIP funds. We work with you as well in Wayne County on how to use those DSIP funds, not only for infrastructure, but also for improvement of educational schools infrastructure as well. So, but thank you, it was a great question.
Thank you.
Pending any other questions, I will cede my time.
I would
Back
just
to
hope
the city
some
manager.
organizations out there that build housing and complexes watch your brief and contact you as to what will be coming available for your military personnel in the near future.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having us as part of your community, and welcome to North Carolina.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Colonel McElhaney, before you leave, I just want to make a comment. Colonel McElhaney is going to be leaving Seymour Johnson in a few months, going south down to Florida. I was in a NC Military Affairs Commission meeting on Tuesday. The members of that committee were briefed on your efforts on the part of housing for our military. And I didn't have to say anything good about you because they all were talking about you, and they're going to miss you. I didn't really have the heart to tell them that you were leaving, though. So, but she is well known amongst the North Carolina Military Affairs Organization for her efforts here. And you won't necessarily see some of these people again before you leave, but I just want to, I will see you, of course, but some of them will not. I just wanted to, on behalf of our city, thank you for all the things that you've done during your tour of duty here. We'll hate to see you leave.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. And I already started the transition. There is my replacement taking a picture.
Come on up and a quick introduction.
Yeah.
Colonel Todd Walker, our change command is in June. He will be taking my place. He is the same career field as the CMOS that I am. He's coming to us from Pennsylvania, from the Defense Logistics Agency distribution. So he will be here in June with his family, and he has teenagers at school. So he has teenagers. So, but he got him off on a good start this week, and he'll be back in June to take my place.
Awesome.
But thank you all. This has been amazing working with all of you. I never really thought this would be part of my job as a mission support group commander, but I have loved every minute interfacing with the community and being able to support you and receive support from you. So I know some of you are attending Dennis Gibson's retirement ceremony and dinner tonight, so I look forward to seeing all of you there who are attending. But I will let you get back to this so you can.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel.
All right. Bye-bye.
You ready, sir?
Yes, sir.
All right, so for the 1 o'clock presentation, we have representatives from NC State University, the CDDL folks. They, if you recall, I guess about a year ago, we signed an agreement with them to do what's called the Goldsboro flood print. So we brought them here to give you a little bit of an update and look forward to hearing from them. We have two presenters. The first is Travis Klondike. He's a licensed landscape architect and an assistant research professor in the Coastal Dynamics Design Lab and Department of Landscape Architecture and Environmental Planning at NC State University. Go Pack. His work focuses on helping communities better adapt to natural hazards and climate change by leveraging contemporary methods of geospatial analysis, public engagement, visual narration, and grant writing as catalysts for public good. Mr. Andy Fox is a professor of landscape architecture and environmental planning, university faculty scholar, NC State Community Engaged Faculty Fellow, and the founding co-director of the NC State Coastal Dynamics Design Lab. As a professional landscape architect, the goal of his work is tangible, actionable charge in the public realm. His teaching, scholarship, and engagement activities focus on people-water relationships with expertise in green infrastructure, high-performing public landscapes, and resilient community design. So with that, we'll welcome them up to present. And it took me a while to figure it out, but there's a pointer if you need it at the top here, and then right to forward.
Thank you, Bobby, and thank you to the council for allowing us to speak to you today and provide an update about our process. So as Bobby alluded to, we are here from NC State University. We are part of a community technical assistance initiative called the Coastal Dynamics Design Lab, which is a mouthful, so we say CDDL. And our goal is to help Eastern North Carolina communities recover from floods and also develop long-term plans for resiliency. So kind of how to bounce forward, if you will, instead of just bouncing back. What is being handed out is a copy of our 50% report document that we'll be talking to you a bit about today in terms of our process. So again, the introduction to the lab. This work is being funded by the North Carolina Office of Recovery and Resiliency, NCORE, and the prime sponsor of it is HUD. And so this is not costing the city of Goldsboro a penny. We pride ourselves on being able to bring work and resources into communities without it becoming any kind of financial burden for the communities. We've been doing this work in earnest since 2017 following Hurricane Matthew across a number of communities in Eastern North Carolina. We've been in more than 30 different communities with the floodprint process occurring in places like Lumberton, Princeville, Whiteville, Goldsboro, of course, and working with the Coharie tribe and other communities that have been drastically affected by floodwaters. Our project timeline in Goldsboro is a 16-month timeline, so we're halfway through that, so the 50% report. And what you've got in front of you today, that's the slides that we're presenting have a lot of fine print on this slide, so our intent is that you don't have to read all the slide, but you can reference the document in front of you, but we'll use those images to kind of walk you through where we're at in our process, our initial findings, how we are kind of arrived in our focus areas, and then our next steps in the process, which is really critical to have you aware of this process. All of our work in the floodprint communities, right now we've brought in over $5 million directly into communities that we've worked with to actually implement what's in the documents. So we write these documents very strategically to be highly competitive in large grant programs. And with the pending grants in hand, we're almost at $15 million. The goal here is to get to the change that's going to help make the community more resilient. So our grant is, we're actually working with NCORE in 5 different communities, and those communities are determined by their classification in HUD mid counties. So this is, I believe, page 4 of the document, which mid MID is most impacted and distressed from Hurricanes Matthew and Florence. And so that's how we've arrived at Goldsboro and other counties and municipalities, is that that's kind of the initial threshold for selection. So that's when we came to you. I was online at that time dealing with some COVID issues in my house, in which you all agreed for the MOU to be signed. And as we move through the process, us updating you and you being involved in making decisions is key, because we can't get to those grant programs without city adoption of the actual plan. So it needs to be a formalized city adopted document to then have leverage in some of these large state and federal grant programs. So what is a flood print? Again, this is in the document. Flood printing is, you can think of it as a blueprint for floods. So kind of a play on words. And then we also recognize that how flooding impacts every community is different. So we look at 4 major kind of activities. One is scoping. It's really finding the right size project in the right place to make a difference. And within our expertise, our realm of expertise, and also then scaling those, understanding that a lot of these changes need to be phased in step-by-step, kind of an incremental fashion. Also then communicating both with the citizens and residents of communities, leadership, and then trying to bring together a larger network of partnerships that kind of help enable the resources to flow into a community. And then implementing is really building that change. And so that's in our process in other communities. That's where we're at in the process. Some large FEMA grants and other kind of grants that are coming in to actually build a retrofit infrastructure that have measured flood risk reduction impacts and also getting folks into safer conditions. So where we're at in the process, Travis is the project manager on this. I'll let him walk you through where we're at with things.
Great, thanks for letting us be here today and use some of this time to provide you an update with our project. So where we're at in the process, the 50% document largely contains inventory and analysis, so what we call a lot of the front-end work of our document. So as an initial step of identifying places in and around Goldsboro for us to focus on, we identified all of the sub-watersheds that are within or intersect Goldsboro city limits and did a preliminary vulnerability assessment as to how many structures would be impacted by a large-scale storm event. And so through this analysis, there were 3 sub-watersheds in West and South Goldsboro that had the highest concentrations of structures that we would anticipate to receive damages during a large-scale storm event. And so notably for us, this eliminated the Stony Creek sub-watersheds as being part of our kind of area of focus. We recognize there's additional project work and investments from the state going on in the Stony Creek sub-watershed area right now. But for us, as in terms of areas in which we could provide the most potential beneficial impact, the areas in South and West Goldsboro, through this analysis, resonated as being the areas where there was the highest level of vulnerability. So that's where we then went to more of a zoomed-in view of the city of Goldsboro and looked at where called out here in the orange are the portions of the floodplain in South and West Goldsboro that are intersecting those same 3 sub-watersheds. So through this, we then started working with city staff to identify potential projects within these areas. So listed on this map in the white and orange text are all the different projects that we considered. These were projects that we felt like we could either help with based on our background and disciplinary expertise, but also that we felt like might score well on a grant application for potential funding. So to walk through these quickly, we looked at various types of infrastructure improvements, roadway changes, and/or natural and nature-based infrastructure practices were kind of the prominent themes of projects that we assessed. There were 3 that really resonated through this process as being the ones that we felt like we could help the most with. One being infrastructure improvements and stream restoration along Big Ditch, looking at the golf course just behind us here and the neighborhood surrounding the golf course for nature-based infrastructure improvements and elevations of homes, and then also looking at a feasibility assessment of the wastewater treatment plant. So as Andy mentioned earlier, a really important part of our process is identifying projects that A, we feel like we can assist with, but B, that we feel like we can create collateral for that would assist in state and federal grant applications. So we assessed all the different projects through that lens as well. So what components of these projects would potentially score highly when put together in a grant application. All of our documents to date, working in other communities, are really catered toward this end. So how are we creating cut and paste material that can be applied in federal and state grant applications so that it has the highest chance of funding? And so these 3 projects really stood out above the rest in terms of their potential scoring criteria for external investment. Zooming into each of these 3 focus areas, so looking along Big Ditch, we understand there's been some past restoration work along Big Ditch. It includes 2 properties that are administered by the Goldsboro Housing Authority, circumnavigated by the local historic district, and there are over 100 vulnerable properties and over a dozen road crossings in our study area that would be impacted by even moderate storm level events. So for us, there's a lot to consider here, but just for kind of quick reference, our area of study is on the south, looking at South John Street, and then north by the railroad tracks from Royal Avenue. Those are sort of the bounds of our study for our purposes for the floodprint report. This illustration shows the road crossings between South John Street and Royal Avenue and how the elevations and culvert sizes are impacting flooding of those roads. And so what this initial analysis showed, working with hydraulic modelers at NC State University, is that all of these road crossings would overtop during a large-scale storm event, and many of them would also overtop during what we'll call a moderate or small storm event, so even like a 10-year flood. Thematically, a lot of the culverts are undersized along Big Ditch, so there's water that's either backing up or it's having velocity and capacity changes that are impacting flood damage because of the culvert size of the roadways. And it's having a negative impact both on the areas immediately adjacent to the roads, but also for vehicular traffic that's going over the road crossings too. And so, for us, we think there's a blending here that could be quite successful in looking at upgrading culvert conditions at roadway crossings, but then also looking at areas where there's a potential to do actual stream restoration projects and widen the floodplain in certain areas to create public amenities, public park spaces that also can hold more flood water. And so we're looking at a combination in Big Ditch of nature-based solutions where that's feasible, and culvert and roadway upgrades in tandem to reduce future flood damages. So we've been meeting with the Goldsboro Housing Authority throughout this process, and we are concurrently working on schematic design, hydraulic modeling, and cost estimating for any improvements here to vet their effectiveness at reducing future flood damage. And then, and as we'll show later, in late March, we'll be at Elmwood Terrace specifically to get community feedback on some of the early alternatives being discussed. So the second focus area is looking at the golf course, and specifically the residential neighborhood just north of the golf course here. This entire area is part of the Neuse River floodplain, but in our initial assessment and talking with city staff, it appears that in the golf course itself, there are a lot of kind of former agricultural ditches that have been either covered up or heavily modified through the years. And this may be impacting nuisance flooding just upstream in the residential neighborhood just north. And so we're currently, similar to Big Ditch, looking at schematic alternatives within the golf course, infrastructure improvements within the roadways of the neighborhood just north, and then testing that through hydraulic modeling and cost estimating to arrive at potential cost-effective solutions to reduce nuisance flooding. I will note that the flooding observed here is much different than along Big Ditch. So Big Ditch is predominantly tributary and stream flooding, which is a bit more controllable. Here we're dealing with the Neuse River channel and the Neuse River floodplain. So it's a much larger scale of flood impacts. And so there's not really much we could do from like a natural infrastructure perspective within and around the golf course that would eliminate large-scale flooding impacts seen in the surrounding neighborhoods. But for the smaller storms, so like a 5 or a 10-year event, there are early analysis shows that there are practices we could implement that would reduce smaller-scale storm events. And then we're also partnering these with showing the feasibility of elevation of properties within that area for homeowners who may be interested in providing elevations and showing what that would look like for homeowners that may be interested. And then the third focus area and the last one is the wastewater treatment plant. This is a regional scale map that shows basically everything in the river basin from Goldsboro on the left side of the screen down to the New Bern on the right side of the screen, following the Neuse River, and the potential impacts of the wastewater treatment plant being impacted by a large-scale storm event and the downstream impacts that might be assessed. So, we are landscape architects and planners. We are not engineers specializing in wastewater treatment plants. However, we can write grants. And so as part of our project team, we have money allocated for a TBD consultant to be identified community by community. And so here in this case, we realize this is a little bit outside of our area of expertise. So we have used this TBD consultant line item to bring on a wastewater utility engineer into the project team to help us craft RFQ, RFP scope language and cost estimates for doing a feasibility study of potential infrastructure improvements at the wastewater treatment plant to make it more resilient to future flood damage. So for us, we would be assisting in grant writing efforts to then do a feasibility study. And that's kind of as far as we'd be able to take it, but we feel like that's helpful for the city in this direction. So we've done some early public engagement here in Goldsboro where we looked at different nature-based and infrastructure improvements and got what we were seeking was early feedback on different types of practices or best management practices, and gauging if there was any likes or dislikes from stakeholders in terms of what practices could even be possible. So these range everything from elevating houses to floodplain parks to green streets, and we showed examples of what those could look like, both three-dimensionally with photo examples, and then their level of general effectiveness, so high, medium, low. And then this was a 2-day event, so we did one event which we predominantly asked people for feedback on those different practices, and then we had another kind of working session here in this room, looking at the golf course specifically and different alignments that we could be looking at for opening up ditches and enhancing both play at the golf course, but also hopefully reducing flood upstream. And so the outcomes from the public engagement, the first public engagement events are included in the hard copies that you all have been provided. But to know kind of where we're going with this, so we're, as I mentioned earlier, in the process of developing and assessing different alternatives. But as Andy mentioned earlier, we really invite you all to participate in this process as it gets a little bit further along. Now is a really critical time for us to be getting feedback both from stakeholders but also from elected officials and staff. Ultimately, we'll be having 2 or 3 alternatives presented in each place in which we're focusing, and kind of dialing that into one preferred alternative is a really critical point, and that's what we'll ultimately use for grant language. So we invite your participation and input. As we mentioned earlier, we'll be at the Elmwood Terrace property end of March soliciting feedback on specific alternatives in that location, but we'll be back throughout the spring and summer for additional public engagement events as well. So that probably was a lot. I talk a little fast sometimes, but hopefully that's kind of a good overview, just kind of the inventory analysis of kind of how we got to the 3 focus areas in which we're working. But we're more than happy to take any questions at this time, should there be any.
I got a couple of comments and a couple of questions. One, first of all, thank you for this presentation. This is really informative. I love pictures, and it helps me understand things much better than just words and people talking. So thank you for that. Question, and when you come back, hopefully we're aware of that so some of us can attend your presentations or whatever. I heard you mention in relation to the big ditch, the housing authority 2 or 3 times. Yep. Assuming that you have had conversations with the housing authority.
Correct.
And do you find them interested and willing to work with you and so forth?
Yes, they've been great to work with thus far. Anthony, Matilda, Jessica, they've been really great to work with, and they're very open to some of the ideas that we're suggesting. I had a site walk with them 2 days ago, actually, and it was quite productive. So in many ways, by creating more of a stream restoration project at Big Ditch in that location, it actually could create park-like amenities for a lot of the residents that live right around Big Ditch. And so we're kind of reviewing it as a win-win in that regard in terms of reducing flood, but also providing tree canopy, access to playgrounds, access to nature. So there's ways in which we can reduce flood, but also accommodate like more general parks and recreation needs for that community at the same time.
Another key aspect to the work is having those conversations, learning about what their plans are. So if we know there are going to be investments, either highly vulnerable structures removed from the floodplain that are part of their bigger plans, those are leveraging opportunities to take those costs and be able to then use that as match towards a bigger grant. And so if we're not having those conversations, then we can't be strategic about the financial design of all this, which we recognize the financial realities of these projects. So we're very careful as we move through the cost estimating to be able to align grant programs in a way that minimize what any cost would be to the city itself, but trying to leverage work that's going on in this space, because there's a lot. There's a lot of kind of money moving around, and half the battle is getting folks talking together that are working on similar or aligned projects. So we see this opportunity with the Housing Authority to be one of those really key moments to improve the environment, reduce risk for those residents, and basically create those improvements as part of all the other exciting things that it looks like the Housing Authority has going on with the big planning grant that they were awarded recently too.
Sure. The Housing Authority, almost between 8 and 10%, it varies, but probably 8 to 10% of our total population in the city is provided housing or lives within Housing Authority homes and so forth. And a number of their housing locations are along these low-lying areas. And that's why I wanted to make sure that we had a good relationship, they had a good relationship with you and so forth, and that you're well read in on their plans for the changes that they're about to make or in the process of making. The second question was, I find this fascinating information. I want to ask, do you all have any association with the Eastern Carolina Flood Resiliency Organization? You ever heard of it?
Not by that name. We're definitely connected in with state level and different COGs and different groups that are working kind of in these same areas. But that particular one, I don't recognize.
This is a coalition of eastern counties along the seacoast here and inland waterway areas that were affected by floods and hurricanes back in 2017-18 timeframe. And they are a legitimate organization. They meet periodically. We hosted their meeting last year here in this event center. And they have county representation. They get state funding. And their goal is to look at the same situations that you're looking at here for those counties that are affected by floods. So I've dropped that name to you. You have some commonality here.
Yes, we'll definitely do a little homework there and see if there's opportunity to.
I think there's about 5 or 6 counties involved in it.
Okay, wonderful.
As you were going through Big Ditch, you know, it would be great to do a major remodel and rebuild of it. But it's also, at least just to the layman, it looks like it's filled up with silt, it's filled up with sand, it's filled up with roots. Is there low-hanging fruit that you guys just peripherally would recommend that we pursue just to get some resiliency on the table in the near term?
It's challenging with Big Ditch, I'll just be quite
Yeah.
frank. The specific kind of condition of the channel itself, there's so much concrete
Right.
there in the channel that to make any modifications is going to be expensive no matter which way you do it. And then with the preliminary modeling that we are working with engineers in NC State, just making improvements to only the roadways themselves only has a minimal impact. So there's a need to combine roadway infrastructure improvements with opportunities to restore the stream together to have the most impact. So I think it's helpful to think of it in phases. You know, if there's an ultimate end goal to do improvements at the culvert and road crossings and to restore the stream at certain locations where that's feasible, then there might be what I'll call more low-hanging fruit, which might be looking at some of the roads first. But again, it's kind of, whichever way you do it, it's going to be expensive.
Right.
So I wouldn't say there's like a really like inexpensive kind of fast option that would have a lot of impact. Just the existing condition of the channel itself is heavily modified.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And part of what they're looking at from their engineering models is maintenance. So the sedimentation,
Yeah.
some of those other issues, when properly designed as a restoration project, they can design those flows to carry that sediment in a more predictable way and to kind of dump it in the new restored floodplain. instead of having to figure out how to get a machine in there and do a lot of things they have to do now. And what's important to understand about Big Ditch too is the project in any phasing has to start at the bottom and work up. So you're not creating a condition that's holding up above and kind of dammed up. And so that's one of the reasons why Elmwood Terrace, that lower section, is immediately the thing we're looking at. It's because it's bottom up and then slowly kind of working and figuring out how to deal with it moving up, because properties are so tight onto it as well that, you know, there's private property ownership issues that we can't upset those rights.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Bobby, anything to add?
I'll just say we really appreciate the opportunity to work with these guys. They approached us.
Bobby, can you?
Appreciate the opportunity to work with these gentlemen. They approached us sometime back in early 2022. I was a little suspicious of it, to be quite honest. I'm always a little suspicious when there's no cost to the city. So I was very wary of that, but after talking with them, incredibly excited about this opportunity, especially dealing with some of the areas in our community that may have been overlooked in the past for whatever reason. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity for us to have these options in front of us and see what the funding opportunities may come from it. So really appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. You ready to move forward with the facilities issues, Mayor? Okay. Matt?
I was trying to encourage Tim to say take a 5-minute break, and if everybody want to stand up and stretch out for just a minute or whatever, are we good?
No, show us the elephant in the room.
Okay. All right, well, we had a good retreat so far, and a lot of things we've talked about kind of have led up to this, because a lot of the department heads they're keeping an eye on the buildings and stuff, and so that's what I'm going to be talking about here shortly, is facility maintenance and specifically buildings, less on grounds, but that's the department we're talking about here. I grabbed a little excerpt from our adopted financial policies in 2010, and that's also in the back of your presentation, that in a sort of a spreadsheet on the condition of our various 30 or so buildings that we have in the city. But this is important because it already provides us direction on how to go. It doesn't say, how you should get there, but it says you should be doing these things. And it says the city will maintain all its assets to a level adequate to protect the city's city's capital investment to minimize future maintenance and replacement costs. And the city will identify the estimated cost and potential funding sources for each capital project proposal before it's submitted for approval. And the city will attempt to determine the least costly and most flexible financing methods for all new projects. I put that up there because one of the things about buildings is they are our largest capital asset. In other words, that's, if you look at our audits, that's what besides personnel, I don't consider personnel, but they're the most vital. But capital, our buildings are the most things we've got invested in, I guess is what I would say. So the question I have for everybody, are buildings and grounds the elephant in the room? What I mean by that, I just said they're our largest capital items. It's a large major expenditure. Are we talking about it, or are we dealing with it, or just kind of sweeping it under the rug? And if we are, then it's going to eventually catch up with us, and that's the point of that. And so right now, or maybe in the past, we've been a little bit kind of not paying much attention, so we're kind of like this elephant just kind of sleeping there. So I like that. But so who's the responsible? Well, we're all kind of responsible for our buildings, but we're also got a department that's particularly credited or responsible for doing that. And that's the Buildings and Grounds Division. And they're a staff of 5, and I put it there, are we sized correctly? Well, we talked earlier about Scott's doing a lot of his expertise and doing a lot of things sort of that was pushed on him. And, as we transition, we may need another person there to help oversee a lot of this planning that we need to do to start replacing our buildings. But right now, we've got Mr. Bill Peter, who's our superintendent, and we've got 4 other staff there. And again, they're maintaining thousands of heated square feet, 24 buildings, and our city staff. So one of the things we thought about doing is, and we all know that this year has been kind of problematic with situations we've had with mold, which we all know is a 4-letter word, and it's been sort of problematic for us. We needed to have, a more centralized oversight of the process. So now, currently, we kind of have department oversight. So various people are somewhat reporting issues with the buildings, and sometimes they tend to go unreported. So there's no centralized reporting process, and the follow-up has been limited. Well, what we're talking about doing in the new process, we're starting to work through this, is consolidation under building and grounds. As you mentioned earlier, Mayor, that means some of our contracts, or all of our contracts, and the way we approach things. An annual building inspection and evaluation process, just to see where we're at every year, see if we're trying to get to a more of a preventive maintenance situation rather than a reactionary basis. And some of these pictures that I'll show you just a little later will kind of give us areas that I think we need to go ahead and address and get our buildings back on par so they'll last longer for them, because if we take care of them, they're going to last longer. So one of the things we talked about is a work order system using our current technology through CityWorks software. So Scott is arranging, his department's arranging that training for our employees, those that are going to be issuing work orders or putting work orders in the system. And this is going to lead to, we believe, improved oversight and accountability. All right, so talked a little bit about this example. Felicia mentioned this. This building is over 100 years old. The first time I went into it, I was like, oh, we got a problem here. And so, as Felicia said, you guys did the right thing, because we not only have mold, but we have lots of issues with just safety over there. And this is a public building, just like all these buildings are. We can't have it in the kind of condition it was in, so we had to close it down, and we all know about that. So this is an example of what I'm calling buildings of concern. This is the public safety complex hallway between PD and fire gym and the living quarters. That looks like, yes, it just needs a little bit of paint, but there should be more to that. And so that's why our building and grounds is a concern, what they've given us. Here we have the exterior wall on the south side of PD and fire department. What that is cracks. Unfortunately, we have some settling issues there. I don't know if the council's completely aware of this, but it is something we're looking into, getting someone out, a structural engineer, to try to give us possible remediation and recommendations of how to solve the settling issue. But that is what causes that settling. I'm not a contractor, but that's not normal to have. And you'll see some of these. It's not normal to have this. Sometimes have surface cracks, but some of these cracks are not just that. It's more than just that. Again, another example of the PD fire, the gym is an additional crack. And there's probably more than these, but these are just some of the bit more noticeable ones. So here's a PD gym window. There's a gap there from settling. We go in there and we can remediate and put it and fix these problems, but it's not going to change the overall problem, which again is the settling, which again, what I was told is when this addition occurred, that there wasn't, the soil wasn't, right. It wasn't properly compacted or whatever happened. So over the years, we're going to see some shifting. It's normal for every building to settle a little bit. It's different when in just a few short years, it's settling, by the way, it's settling here. So here's an example of how, and I think this is a good example of the lobby and the men's bathroom floor protruding, again, from settling. So that could be an individual thing right there. It could be something that's bigger. That's why we got to do the evaluations, similar to what we're doing with the HVA system there, which we're going to fix, and we're already in the process of getting that done. This is the next step, is getting the settling issue fixed, but that's going to be a big deal. Public Works, collections, office wall, there's some cracks there. I haven't visually inspected all these cracks. This is one I haven't, the other ones I had, but not this one. And then here in the event center, as you walk in the side door there, you can see this is a really good picture of what's going on there. And there's just, as we continue to use this building, which is, it's a great building, good revenue source for a great resource for the public, it's going to see more wear and tear, so we have to stay on top of these needed changes, just basic things like, carpet, look at that's getting worn. We're going to need to replace these things. And as Felicia mentioned, the plumbing through here, we've got some lines that are not working properly. We've got a price on that, we think, but we're still looking at other options. But none of them are inexpensive, so these are older buildings that just need some TLC. So in my opinion, this might not be true to everybody, but it's one of our greatest capital assets, and say that because, if you think about all the money we put into things like the city hall and all our fire stations and police stations, and it's a big deal. So we need to do an in-depth analysis of the condition of our buildings, which I've talked briefly to the Public Works and Building Grounds Department, including a scoring matrix. Sort of like, what we do with our roads, which I think is called a PCR, pavement condition report. Maybe we could do the same thing with the buildings. We need to apply proven maintenance, preventive maintenance methods and best management practice to ensure the greatest longevity of our buildings as possible, which means that we have to, stay on a schedule when we need to do things. Like if the floor here starts to see sags and stuff, you don't want to wait till it's already past its life. You want to go ahead and do these things, and then you have to start replacing the subflooring and stuff like that because you've waited too long. So we these critical repairs into a capital improvement plan. That's what we're talking about doing this year, based on that scoring matrix. And the critical repairs is high priority items, and that's what we're going to try to bring you to, the high priority areas that we need done first. So, like most of us, our individual homes are our biggest capital asset. That's why I think we should treat our capital assets here in the city of Goldsboro the same way. They'll take care of them, and they'll last for us, and they'll take care of us. So, and then we end up more like this. We're happy and we're content because our buildings are happy and content. All right. No, there's nothing behind it.
And you create a matrix?
No, it's in the binder. It was too difficult to read. Oh, well, yeah, it's kind of difficult to read. But this is just the first stab at it, just a basic inventory of what the buildings are and the conditions. That's for your information. We're going to elaborate and drill down on this a little bit more as we go along. Any questions? And I think the last thing is just that the excerpt from the fiscal policy and budget policies.
Now, this
Yes, sir.
this much more closely mirrors what I'm used to seeing for large organizations to be able to manage their buildings over multiple campuses, things like that. And I really like the approach. I'm kind of curious. Generally, when in commercial properties you look at, or industrial properties, you look at some ratio so that you can predict your maintenance cost over the next year, either 3% of plant value or 5% of plant value or something like that based off of the age of the facilities. Do you plan to get all the way down over the course of the next year or so into where that you're forecasting maintenance costs by buildings for budgeting purposes?
I don't know if we'll get quite, but we're certainly going to drill down more on this here, just as far as we feel like the roof is poor. Okay, well, the ones that are poor, we're going to take a more in-depth look at it, see what it costs to repair it. And the scoring matrix will be based on something that we talk about, and we've got to do some more research with building and grounds about it. But I've talked with the staff about it and talked about, getting the training done. And there's, I think, if I had to say for sure, I can't really say for sure, but I think some of it's just kind of fall into the cracks. So I think it's about accountability right now. So having different people that are working in the different departments be assigned as building managers, and they report their problems to buildings and grounds, and we actively work those problems. I think somehow, some way that something happens, it just, this needs attention, and it sort of has fallen by the wayside. So we just have to keep a way of focusing on this stuff to make sure we're doing what we need to be doing. It's gonna require, just like everything else we've talked about today, and that's why you guys have a really tough job. And I say that, you know, it's gonna require more funding, because we haven't been doing it really, the way we, you know, maybe it's just because it's a building and it doesn't talk, you know. It's just, but it keeps us dry, it keeps our employees, it's where they live for a good part of their day.
And Matt, one other thing, and this comes from a little bit of ignorance because I never really put two and two together until today, but how did housekeeping end up under P&R?
I don't know.
Okay. I'll leave that.
That's a question that, you know, I've wondered.
Felicia's
I've
been
asked
here a while,
myself.
she could talk to that. I think the previous director took that on as part of a capacity, and the funding shifted with that.
It is a long story, but I'll try not to make it too long. So housekeeping specifically for the city halls, it used to be up under HR. And well, I do not know if there was ever like full-time staff there, because I know when I started, they were using temporary staff. And for us with Parks Recreation, we, have custodians for our buildings anyway. And so at one point, I think with the previous city manager, going through the budgeting process, trying to see how can we be more efficient. Parks and Recreation, you already got custodians, you're already buying custodial supplies. We're actually buying it in bulk because we have multiple facilities we're overseeing, including our park restrooms. So let's see if, just put, all the custodians up under you. And we do not have all of the custodians for like different security reasons and things. For instance, like PD fire, because of security reasons, they have their own custodian at the complex there, because one of the things with us having a team of custodians, if Laura's out sick today, I'm going to send Matt in her place to clean the facility. Can't really do that with PD. Okay. So, but for the most part, that's how we absorb the custodians.
Okay. Does it work?
Depends on who you ask.
Okay. Point taken.
I mean, especially when you're dealing with hiring issues, trying to have consistency, kind of, I guess, referencing what I was saying earlier, where we try to make things work. So we hire custodians, and yes, you may clean this facility, but this is not your facility. Right. In that, like the example I just gave, if someone's sick, I'm going to pull you and put you someplace else. And that's just the nature of our field with Parks and Recreation. So that's what it depends upon who you ask. They may or may not like being moved around.
Thank you.
There's another story. How did you get downtown beautification? That's another story.
Y'all want me to tell you about that? No, so quickly, downtown beautification, several departments used to contract out with different contractors to come and do different parts of downtown. This was before we got the Tiger Grant and everything, as we were getting that. And some of the issues that the departments were running into is, if, like with any contract, I am going to come and do what I have to do downtown around City Hall every Thursday. Well, if you have a storm that come up Thursday evening, you have debris there Friday morning. My contract with you is to come and do it Thursday. I will get to it next week. I may be able to get to it today, but I have other businesses. And so with that, it then fell on reaching out to either Public Works and or Parks and Recreation for us to try to come and clean it up. And then there were a lot of weekend activities that were going on, where by the time it was realized something hadn't gotten done, the Public Works staff, they were already gone. And so then it was just purely reaching out to Parks and Recreation. And so with the previous Parks and Recreation director, which I did agree with, it was like, well, if y'all gonna call us to clean up the mess, just give us the job anyway. But we also thought we would get more staff with that, which we haven't yet. Hint, hint. Any other questions?
We're good.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mary, you ready for me, or you want to take a break? You good?
There it
Thank
is.
you. All right, so I wanted to relate to council and to the public what my guidance has been to department heads. I produced this last week. The department heads will come up with their budgets. You'll see here what it says on the slide is recently the city has raised pay for employees, purchased critical equipment, and increased general fund and utility fund balances by cutting operational expenses and raising rates and fees. That's been over the last couple of years. You'll see some of the members back there and our city employees, well, you haven't done enough of raising the pay. You know, last year we did 5% COLA, but before that we didn't do a lot except for some specific departments that were losing a lot of people, whether it be the fire department or police department. So we would like to continue to be able to fund our employees, and I'll talk about that in a little bit here. And we've purchased critical equipment like Rick mentioned. You know, in the past, they may not have been funded as well as we have most recently, but he's been in most desire for that. But you've heard from everybody else. From the fire department, we bought a fire truck. The police haven't got enough police cars. Any one of these people will tell you they don't have enough. But I can't print money, unlike the federal government. So we have to be able to do with what's in our budget. And at the same time, we've had very low, as you've seen, general fund and utility fund balances that have to be increased if we're going to get off the LGC watch list. So that's the however portion of this. So the city remains on the North Carolina Local Government Commission Unit Assistance List due to late audits, which I think we're fixing here, that you saw the audit, and hopefully we get caught up by the end of this next year, and the fact that we have these low fund balances. And so I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that and what our goals are going to be going forward, because that will affect the budgeting process. I've asked the departments to continue to budget conservatively while addressing the costs of inflation. You know, the costs, they're going to go up. We've talked about this, whether you're buying a public works or public utilities infrastructure, or you're paying for equipment, or you're paying for people. So, you know, if we were to ignore those costs of inflation, we would be under budgeting what we need to do. And pending council retreat guidance, which will be on the next slide that we're going to try to pull out of council to some degree, department heads should submit their FY23 and 24 budget in line with the previous budget cycle, plus any changes we've made over the course of the year. I've asked them to hold the line on their spending if we are to continue to afford a cost of living allowance for our employees, if we want to pay them for performance, if we want to give them a Christmas bonus, if we want to give them the salary, the years of service increase that we talked about earlier. So when it comes to cost of living allowance, I've done a little bit of research. We're going to wait for the North Carolina League of Municipalities to come out and give us that guidance that Catherine will get in the March time frame, but it's probably looking around 4% right now. If you want to do a performance pay that we do mid-year, I don't know whether that's 1% or more, depending on what we've done in the past and what we can afford. The employees really appreciated the day off, but I'm sure they would appreciate a bonus a little bit more at the Christmas time frame so that they have something to go out and spend on their families. And of course, we just talked about the need to really increase the employee service amounts. So I think that'll be important to do going forward. I've asked the department heads to increase their revenue sources as appropriate. And everybody's been, I'm big on benchmarking the local governments around here. We want to be our costs want to be in line with what our peers and competitors are. We don't want to be below them, or we won't have the funding to afford the things that you've heard about all day long the last 2 days. Okay, so the next slide is, what does the council think out of all this? What are your priorities? I mentioned a few things here, you know, employee pay and public safety. We've been losing those employees more than anybody else, and we certainly need them. Do we continue to put more money into public safety? The targets, let's talk about the general fund and the utility fund balances and those targets. When it came to the general fund, you know, we have a floor of 10% and a target of 15%, and we saw those metrics through the Davenport presentation. Should our target be 20% for the general fund? When it comes to the utility fund, we talked about cash available. Our target was 50%, but if you remember the Davenport presentations, 50% was below average. We probably need to be above 100% to be average. So I would say maybe we make the floor 50% and the target 100%. And if we do that, and we budget accordingly, that again constrains our ability to spend on everything that all these department heads have been talking to you about. But if you want to be a AA rated, solid, finance-backed city, we need to consider those things. And then when it comes to rates, property tax and utility rate adjustment for inflation. I think we want to at least stay, adjust for inflation our utility rates, 3-4%, so we can stay up with the average in North Carolina. You've seen plenty of requirements out there. There are a lot of them. To just rely on federal funding, like ARPA funding, that was previously mentioned by Bobby. We tried to apply for $8.5 million. That certainly would have helped, but we didn't get it. So are we just going to ignore those problems, or are we going to address them? And then fees, I know the Parks and Rec is going to look very closely at your golf course fees, as well as these GEC fees. We need to take a look at the Bryan Multi-Sport Complex fees, inspections department, utility costs, etc. So I put this information out for you all to consider. You may or may not have any feedback for us at this period of time. Over the course of the next couple of months, we will need to talk about those things more in depth, and I'll have more detail for you as I take a look at the budget submissions, which are going to be due here in the beginning of March, in accordance with that timeline for submitting the budget request, the review that gets done by the management staff, and then ultimately that goes to council in mid-May, and then we'll have that budget process for council in the end of May, early June timeline on what we're going to fund. Are there any questions? Can I help field this discussion?
I'll save my comments to last on this one.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? We still have one more presenter,
Let's see here.
Octavius.
I think, Dan, we roll to council's budget guidance and the retreat wrap-up, sir.
Yeah. Okay.
And Laura, you said you wanted a 5-minute break to pull up. All decisions have been made so far. We'll go through them, and then we can add on whatever council wants to from kind of what I've just mentioned here.
And also, they're just kind of passing around that overall retreat guidance, the evaluation tool as well. So you don't have to get that back to us today, but just something we'd like to have back sometime.
I'll leave that slide up.
Okay. So, Laura, how about bringing us up to date on our decisions that were made? Did you put together a slide for that?
Can Brad bring that up for you, or? There.
Tim?
Yes, sir.
We're 30 minutes ahead, right?
Yes.
So Octavius, the strategic plan presentation, are we,
Would you like to hear Octavius' strategic plan presentation? Are you ready for that, Murph?
We'll give you 5 minutes. In summary, yes.
Okay, good. We can pull up the online presentation. Staff has learned to adjust around here. They're very adaptable and flexible.
Stand up for a minute, stretch my legs.
I didn't mean to inject or overstep, but we were fortunately 30 minutes ahead, and it was on the agenda. So, yeah, I'm glad you did.
Did I go too fast on mine? I was trying to make up some time.
That's good.
While Octavius is getting ready, Councilman Matthews wanted me to remind you that she left some documents here, some flyers from her presentation yesterday on the San Jose homeless program. I'm going to give them to Laura, and if you want them, you can just get a copy from her. Councilwoman Matthews' flyers that she left yesterday, or spoke about yesterday.
You don't need any more of these. These are individual presentations.
I'm
No,
good.
sir, I've been doing mine.
If mayor's like, stop hitting us with all this stuff.
I've been doing mine.
It is working. Hey, Brad, we're still floating.
Are you ready, sir? Hey, you're on my time.
Oh, good late afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to continue in this strategic planning process. It is exciting what we're doing because the purpose of the strategic plan is to align ourselves with the goals and objectives that you have. And I think we've done a great job in pursuing opportunities to establish metrics for the benefit of the city of Goldsboro. If you see, notice on the left side, you'll see our goals. And our goals are mentioned over here: strong and diverse economy. I'm going to need this. Strong and diverse economy, exceptional quality of life, racial, cultural harmony, model of excellence for in government, and the last one, racial and cultural harmony.
Dang.
This is gonna work, but it is. So, Brad, are you gonna help? Yeah. Thank you. So, if you notice that the goals, the metrics are associated with each goal. So, when we look at our public safety, a safe and secure economy, community, is paramount that we're on target, our data is accurate, and we're reflecting results that are consistent with our messaging, with your leadership. As the police chief mentioned earlier this morning regarding crime rate and Part 1 cleared crime rate for violent and property crimes, it is important that we track and measure these results, and we've been doing that for the past 3 years. On yesterday, we discussed the Part 1 crime rate cleared for the benefit of showing you how we benchmark, how we track and measure
those numbers. And we also showed you, we gave you an indication that we are not performing from a cleared standpoint. That means we're not closing cases in a manner that's consistent with the national level, the national trend. And this is the first time we dipped up under for property. And I'm putting it in layman's terms so you can appreciate what the chief and I are dealing with from a business standpoint. So if that percentage, that cleared percentage falls down, and we're not over that 12 to 14% national benchmark, why is that the case, and what do we have to do to improve our results? Well, the answer to that is staffing, which you already know. That's what he was going to say earlier today. And each department head can say the very same thing within their department. If we look at crime rate, Brad, under Safe and Secure Community, it will tell you the exact same thing. Well, our benchmark is this red arrow here. And we define it clearly, what the definition is, and we say clearly based on our demographics here in the city of Goldsboro, which is less than 50,000 and be above 25,000, what our target is. And we hover, the target line is way down here.
Yeah.
And we are way up here at 58%, which is a spike above this number right here. But our goal is to be way down here. So our performance indicator is in the red. Needs improvement, requires improvement. So what do you do when the variance is so wide? You chip at it one day at a time. And that's all we can do, but you do that strategically. And I think we're doing a good job of that as a city. Brad, if you'll back up and go to, this is kind of the good news, bad news, or the bad news, good news. If you go down to downtown return on investment, this is what I wanted to show you. Right up here, yeah. At the very top where you are. Downtown, return on investment, downtown, okay. So, yesterday I presented the bad news with the Part 1 crime rate cleared. Then I went to the community engagement, which was soft, a pleasant tree because we were performing well from a community engagement. You can't overlook the importance of that. Now we're going back to looking at our success stories. In this category, the benchmark is for us to be 2-to-1 from an investment standpoint. We go out and recruit private, state, federal fundings, and our goal is to at least get 2-to-1 ratio. We invest $1, we get others to invest $2 into the city of Goldsboro. That probably will need to change because we've been so successful at doing this. We're measuring, this particular measure is referred to as a 10-year moving. We're just consolidating all the monies collected or recruited to the city of Goldsboro, which is plus 50-some thousand dollars, 50
million right there, middle paragraph, Mark.
Okay. Right here, 50 million. So when you look at the amount that we've got public, private, state, federal to invest in us, and look at the 12 million that we've invested, it's a pretty good return. And if you look over here in our charts, it's indicating, these are based on millions. We've probably got right at 10 million in investments in year 2022. Compared with the city investment of, and this is a real small number because it's 150,000 into downtown and 0 into other public, which is state and federal funds. So when you look at it collectively, we by far have exceeded that 2-to-1 ratio. We're close to 5-to-1 ratio if you look at the 10-year mover, because we're consolidating those numbers over a certain time frame. That's impressive. But the trend here that you'll see, because the city invested $150,000, here they invested in year 21, they invested $250,000, and here they invested some 4.7 million. This is the 2020. So what that tells you, and if Erin was here, she would say, and I agree with her, that this trend too will decrease or stop heading in such a high direction. Why? Because there's very little investment from the city perspective, out of pocket. So, again, another one of those aha moments. We're trending well, as we did with the police department, but at some point you're going to hit that wall, and it's going to go the other direction if you don't increase your investments into downtown. That's just the way it works. But right now, at a 5-to-1 ratio, and your goal is 2-to-1, it's impressive. It's impressive, but I mean, when you look at it from a statistical standpoint, or an economic development standpoint, or return on your investment, it's just like it will hit its peak and then come back the other direction. Whether you look at our state of being as a recession or inflation, depends on politics, it won't matter, because it'll come back this way. Any questions regarding the return on investment metric? So Brad, if you'll go back to the home. So I can go through each one of these metrics and paint a picture, because the department heads are actively engaged in this internal business, using this internal business tool. Public Works works with it, every day, because when it comes to the CIP and his strategic plan, he has access to it right on his desk. Now, this is a look that no one else gets, what you're seeing today, and we're making it, I guess, it's not entirely public, because we don't, a lot of this is a work in action. But I submit to you, we do a lot with our business partners in the community that we are tracking here in our performance management software. Being more specific, we track our strategic plan results. We track our UNC benchmarking results. We partner with the UNC School of Government, and our department heads travel to Chapel Hill to engage in discussions within their own peer groups, our police department, our fire department, our engineers, our code enforcements. It's a win situation for all parties. We even track and document our financial audit information using ClearPoint. At any time, for the benefit of the city manager, I can get him results and conversation and discussions that are held within the documents, the actual audit itself. And most importantly, the capital improvement plan. Brad, can you click on that as I close? The CIP is extremely important. This, again, is an internal business tool that the department heads are using. We can see at a glance for 2020, FY23, the CIP and its total for all sources. We can see at a glance the total across all the years. And in a 10-year picture, we'll see where we need to be, 317 million. That's a lot of money. So how do you plan and program for those expenditures? as I said, the model that we are currently working towards using is the model that's used in Sugar Land, Texas. It's a 5-year CIP, but it's a well-documented, it's a 147-page document that gives you a clear description of where you are, where you're headed within that 5-minute time frame. We can also transition to the use of funds by category. If it's equipment, if it's engineering, and this tells us if the project is infrastructure above ground versus below ground. That's the difference in public works and engineering. We could tell if it's construction. Embedded inside the fire department CIP is a facility. When that will happen? Well, it may project it to happen in 26, 27 or 24, 25, but the reality of it, it may not happen until 28, 29, FY 29. So this gives you a quick snapshot of where we are. That's the whole purpose of what I do in my office, at a point and click. And most people don't know that where this data comes from, but it comes from the department heads and our business relationships, again, with the School of Government, with ClearPoint Strategies, and all of our other business partners that we engage with, our consultants, with Davenport, and Stantec. So there's a lot of information that we're using in our strategic plan initiatives that are at a point and click. So in closing, thank you for this opportunity. It means a lot because in order for us to be that local government agency that achieves its goals, especially because of our last 12 months with all the exterior eyes on us and the serious nature of that. We have to be really, not only really good, but we have to be in compliance from a leadership perspective. And our strategic plan allows us to do that. It's a roadmap to achieve the visions that you have. In order for us to do that, we need to hear from you. Know that our goals that were shown up here, they were established in 2017. As I said, we're good with our metrics. And Tim will tell you we need to revise some, and we do. But we also need you. We need your leadership. We need your. You don't know this, but Laura worked extremely hard to find some money, some funding for you to attend a course at the School of Government. It's the Strategic Planning Link Strategies for the Elected Officials. We offered it maybe, 30 days ago, neither one of you elected to do this. I even begged Tim for some funding. Tim found $2,000 for each of you to attend. But what this is strategic planning for elected officials setting priorities. I submit to you that this is vital. Your understanding of how strategic planning works is vital to the planning process for the city of Goldsboro. This strategic plan used to be named Grow Goldsboro. Well, we are definitely in the growth mode with all the development that is occurring, and largely because of your leadership. So we need you. Anything we can do to position ourselves for success here locally would be appreciated. And I thank you. Any questions?
Anyone have any questions?
I got a couple comments that I could add on. So the $2,000 isn't per individual. It would be if every council member were to attend this thing. I attended that course, and it is really designed for council members and elected officials. What Octavius Murphy and I and others have put into this is kind of what that's about. So it would give you a much deeper explanation, understanding of what Octavius is trying to describe to you here. Octavius, if you could go back to the, or Brad, if you could go back to the different metrics we're looking at. You know, what I'd like from council, when you get time to think about this, you can go online and see this. This is on the intranet. This is what staff has updated as of the end of the calendar year. They've been spending January and a portion of February here updating their documentation. As soon as we get that complete, we will upload this intranet version into the internet version that you can see online with the updates. But if you see, we've got some pretty healthy metrics on safe and secure communities, strong diverse economy, exceptional quality of life. I mean, take a look at strong and diverse economy. We've got, let's see, downtown increased residential development. I think we've met that metric, but we probably need to increase that to citywide residential development. And you know we're heading in the right direction there. We're expecting potentially 1,500 more units, 10% population growth. Let's take a look at that and how we might measure that growth going forward. If you could keep going down, Brad, on that list there, you'll get to racial and cultural harmony. We've only got 2 metrics, but that's a pretty important thing around here. So what can we do that would help with racial and cultural harmony? I'm thinking events. You know, we've done Martin Luther King events. We've had to work our way through COVID, but everybody would like to go back to that luncheon. There's a certain amount of time frame it takes to do that. We've really done a lot of good things in this realm, but we're not telling that story there. You know, we do the Juneteenth celebration. The council supported that downtown. So there's a lot of things that we could roll into a metric like that to show that we are trying to address that council concern or goal. If you go to Model for Excellence in Government, take a quick look. We got, well, how many metrics there? That's fleet reliability of our vehicles, transportation improvement, workforce representation, inspection responsiveness. Is that the bottom of the line there? You won't see any financial metrics. We probably, and that's where I'm trying to lead you here, where do we need a financial metric in there? To me, that is fund balance guidance. What do you want us to do and how are we related to that fund balance guidance? We can turn that into a metric that's hugely important, but it's not met on here. So that concludes this presentation.
You mentioned yesterday that you work daily on this with your associate. I can't remember the lady's name, but
Mara.
Yeah. So through your ClearPoint software, you take in a lot of data. You gather data. You assess it. You use metrics to assess it. And but it's important that that information flows back. It's coming up to you, but it needs to flow back. I'm not saying it does, I'm just saying that's the best process. And it appears to me that there's a good flow of information up and down. And there should be learning ideas or learning information that comes back as to how to improve all of these areas that you're looking at. But there's also some things that we as a council should be appraised of that we're not getting out of this. And so it may be from time to time important for you to speak to us and tell us, what you're hearing, what they're talking about, that we can have some impact on. So I just leave that for thought.
Well, thank you. And I started yesterday's presentation with the end in mind. I said over the next 6, 12, and 18 months, I will reach out to you and solicit input, solicit opportunities to engage, because that's the answer to the solution. That's how we solve the problems. If you don't know this world exists, and most don't, because I'm the back office. You will rarely, if you see my name somewhere or me somewhere, something's wrong. I work for the benefit of the city manager. It's his name, it's your name, it's the council's name on everything that I do. But thank you for that open door policy, because you'll get that, because that's what we need. I appreciate your observation of that.
Thank you.
Anything else? Excellent.
Thank you. So, Ms. Laura, bring us up to date on.
Thank you.
Sorry.
You fine?
So when I my comments started off yesterday with us, hopefully would listen to the presentations that were given to us. We would assess the information, and we would make decisions or provide guidance. And so at the end of yesterday, Laura told us what we had accomplished in terms of decision making, and you're going to bring us up to date at this time.
So what you see on the screen and in front of you is yesterday's retreat decisions. So there were, let's see, there's 11 of them total. Brad, if you'll pull it down for me a little bit. The next page. And then, today's is at the bottom. There's 2 that I voted for, that were decisions or votes for today.
I've got one additional topic to add when you
Sure.
get to this. Do you want to go through line by line?
Yes.
Okay, so if you go back to number 1, make sure we
You want to go back to the
Ready?
first page for me?
just let people, I've reviewed this, I concur with what she came up with from last night, and then we can talk about today's. But if council wants to just kind of read through this and ask questions as you may, maybe that's the best way.
I'll help us guide
Okay.
through that. So take a look at number 1. The council came to a consensus to move forward with beginning the process to enact the fees after a public comment period of 45 days followed by a public hearing, and that had to do with system development fees. Anybody want to add any comment? Please feel free to comment on these as
I just think
we
it's
go
long
along.
overdue and something we
Sir?
need to do.
Yep, definitely.
We're gonna get some kickback, and we're gonna have to talk to the WDCA and make sure they know where we're coming from too.
Yeah, I agree.
And so, maybe some people in the county.
We need to do that.
Yeah.
We can't be hitting.
Well, we certainly need to look at this and whether, and take into account any feedback that we get from other agencies. And on substandard housing, planning staff was directed to provide maps of properties in each district that contain problem issues. I wanted you to have that, council members, so that you would be able to see in your district what the current situations are on housing, and give you an opportunity to go by, look at them if you desire to do so, and then even feel free to attend our substandard housing meeting that we have on a quarterly basis. And the second part of the substandard housing was that we would bring a revised ordinance updating the minimum housing code to the March 20th council meeting. I might add that a lot of things are going to happen based on this meeting at the March 20th, so don't come in there thinking we're going to leave at 7:30. Any comments on that? Downtown parking, we came to a consensus to hold a public hearing on March 20th regarding the downtown parking. An ordinance amending the current code could be brought to the April 3rd council meeting. On the election method, council came to a consensus to hold a public forum regarding the proposed election method revisions in the city charter. City clerk will research locations, which you did, and you announced that today as March 14th here at 6 p.m. So the public is invited to attend, those of you that are viewing this, and we'll get the word out to the general public as well. On the homeless program, Councilwoman Matthews will bring the homeless program back to a future council meeting to discuss possible fundings. As I said earlier during the lunch break, she left those brochures for you to take if you so desire. They're with Laura, and you can pick those up if you want on the way out. On the FY 23-24 budget, Councilman Gaylor requested adding a detail in the budget for the mayor and 2 council members to attend the Chamber of Commerce annual banquet and the WCDA Industry Appreciation event. Also on the 23-24 budget, council gave direction to the manager to include $300 for the mayor and council in the fees and dues line with no stipulation of what organization it is to be used for. That is for a membership in a organization that, or whatever desire that the council member wants to use it for, hopefully for things that are going to promote their involvement and development of Goldsboro. On the nonprofit organization budget discussion, the council voted to require any MPO with revenues of $200,000 or more would require an audit before giving city grant funding. Number 10, MPO budget discussion. Council voted to use a third-party administrator to administer the FY 23-24 city grant funding. And at the March 20th meeting, we hopefully will have some individuals or agencies come in and speak to us and present to us their ideas about how they would administer the monies, and that's actually item number 11. On today's two items, and I believe the manager is going to add one to that, the 24 Main Street Conference, 2024 Main Street Conference will be held here by vote of the City Council today here in Goldsboro. And this event was held in 2016. We hosted it back in 2016, and we will again host it next year. And on the event venue rental fees, the council voted to adopt a fee schedule that was presented for the hub and Freedom Field, and there's a price structure that went along with that, and with an additional fee for the hub for Freedom Field. And then there's also a refundable deposit that goes along with that as well. So, Mr. Salmon, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yes, sir. Every council member should have on their desk an email that came from the UNC School of Government. We've again been selected for the North Carolina League for North Carolina Fellows. If you may recall, last year Downtown Development had a fellow that significantly added to their capacity. This year we applied for Community Relations and Development to receive that assistance. And so Felicia Williams will potentially have an intern if council agrees to do this. We have to notify them by March 10th whether we want to do that or not. The next council meeting is March 20th, so that's why I'm bringing it to your attention now, because it would affect our next budget cycle. So if council agrees that we should be doing this, we will budget for it accordingly and let the UNC School of Government know. You're probably familiar that what Felicia does with HUD in community development is a very small group of experts, and if we can help make one of those from the UNC School of Government and they get into that field as a profession, I think that'd be a great thing, and I think Felicia could use the help. There's a lot of good work to be done there, so I recommend that we budget $17,000 for that. That is a $53,000 cost that will otherwise be covered by the UNC School of Government and people who donate to this cause.
We had one of these lead individuals work last year with the Downtown Development Department.
Yes, sir.
Was extremely helpful. She took a liking to Goldsboro, may have stayed here and worked had it not been for another opportunity to go back and get, I believe, a master's.
Yes, sir.
So I highly encourage our council to support this proposal here, and if so, could we get a motion to accept this request?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All approving, please signify by raising your hand. That motion is adopted and approved. Thank you.
Excellent.
Anything else, Ms. Summer?
Yes, sir. I'd like to take it back over to you. Is there any guidance from the previous discussion I had on those topics that council members would like to
yes,
express individually or
yeah,
as a
let
group?
me speak to that. I said yesterday at the closed session, I thought we had accomplished a lot. I think it was one of our better days in terms of retreat. This is a carryover of that. And We've seen a lot of wants and needs by departments. We know that in most cases they exceed our budgetary ability to do so. I'm talking about overall. I'm not saying that some of them or any of them are not needed or should be disregarded. But as the manager pointed out, these there are decisions that we're going to have to make here as we go forward with the budget process. Our employees are our most important asset, and we certainly have to consider those that are here with us as well as those that are out doing their jobs today. Our equipment that we use to provide services to the city residents are important. We cannot move the city forward if we don't have dedicated employees and serviceable equipment. So as we go through the budget process in the upcoming weeks, I encourage and I actually demand that our council take a serious look at what has been presented to us this past couple of days here now. Don't think about it. Don't lay this aside and come back on the last week of the budget preparation and say, oh, I hadn't had time to really analyze this. We need to be thinking about it from this day forward. We've got the information here in these folders. We'll have discussions as we go forward. Things like rates for utilities and property fees, property taxes, should we entertain that? And you know, our sales taxes and our property taxes are our two biggest sources of revenue. And we really need, we've got a very serious few weeks ahead of us in terms of getting this budget put together. So I encourage, and again, hopefully, respectfully demand that our council members give this some very, very serious attention. It's been a pleasure here this year to be a part of this because we have been so productive. And unless anyone else has anything else to say, I'll go around one more time. Anyone else have anything else to say?
I'd just like to say, because this has probably been my last retreat, this has been the very best retreat I've been to in 11 years. And I'd like to thank staff. I'd like to thank the presenters out here. We got good information this time. The place was set up. IT did a wonderful job. It's the best one I've seen in 11 years. And it didn't go without a lot of people doing a lot of work. And I just wanted to thank everybody.
Don't forget to fill out your survey, overall satisfaction survey.
I had a couple of things I wrote down. First, I want to commend all the city employees that are still with us. That is a testament of your loyalty and dedication to this great city. I also want to remind the public that we have a difficult task to make decisions that not only affect our taxpayers, but also our workforce and services that they provide. In closing, I want to say that we are not exempt from the possible increases and have families and lives of our own that are directly affected by our decisions. But we were put in these offices to be proactive and ensure that we create the best situation for our city to thrive. So that's all I have.
Anyone else?
Please.
I am unable to speak, and I will share my comments in March. Thank you.
I'll just add that when you're sitting up here and you're listening to the what feels like a snowball of requests for things that have had to be backburnered and set aside, and the things that you then look at it and you realize that you're staring at a very, very large task. You know, it can feel overwhelming, it can sound overwhelming, but what I want to reassure those that are watching is that we have an excellent team of experts within the city, within the organization, that can help to prioritize these things. And we're going to touch as many things as we possibly can, and those that we can't, we're not going to forget about. But it's going to be a difficult budget year, and we've listened to a lot of very compelling conversation about all the different things that need investment and require investment and have been put off for necessary reasons, but for too long. So bear with us, and it's going to be a busy few months. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Bass?
Yes. I call my little tape recorder comes on. Sometimes I'm driving home and laying in bed. I was looking at number 8. I thought about last night, and the only thing that bothered me with that one was number 8. Council gave direction to the manager to include $300 for the mayor and council to the fee and due line with no stipulation. And that's kind of where I'm stuck at. We had no stipulation. So that means if I want to go out and do an organization with my fraternity or et cetera, I can take $300 and do that for her. And I don't think that's what we're meant for, but we got here no stipulation. What do y'all? I just think when you say no stipulation, I think it might be on this board here. I think eventually it's going to be used though. I think we need to look at that if we can't come back with it. My last one, I just want to think, I'm just amazed with all department heads we have. You guys do a great job. And thank you so much for what you do. Also, I say it all the time, employees is the most important thing we have for the city. But again, thank you guys for what y'all do every day. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Let me make one final statement. I started off yesterday thanking the staff for putting together this information that made this possible, for your hard work. You've heard other accolades from council members here this afternoon. And so I think it goes without saying that this could not have been the success it has been without your contribution, without those sitting here, those that are back in the departments working, without Laura, without Holly, and other members of our staff. It's a great feeling to be the mayor of Goldsboro. It really is. I do it with pride because I know what's behind the name Goldsboro. I've said it many, many, many times. You need to feel proud of the place you call home. That's sort of my motto. And believe me, folks, I feel proud to call Goldsboro my house, my home. And before I start crying, I'm going to adjourn this meeting.
Don't forget to...